Okay, I am good to go.
Awesome. Cool. We are live and we got about 10 people so far. So um, hopefully it grows along, grows more.
Yeah.
So thank you, George Harley, for joining us today. George Harley is from What Would Ninjas Do? He has a YouTube channel. Feel free to look it up. One of the best Ninpo Taijutsu ninja channels on YouTube. And he's also from United States Ninpo Academy. But I'll let him introduce himself and give you guys a little description of his martial arts background. Thank you for joining us today, George.
Cool. Thank you for having me. For those of you that have not met me yet, hi, my name's George. I go by Sensei George on the YouTube channel, What Would Ninjas Do? Again, you guys can follow me on these. Now, I have about 11 years background in training in Ninpo, and it's so embedded in my lifestyle. I can tell you the exact day and time in which I started training, which was May 2nd, 2009, 8 o'clock p.m. And I managed to go to a full black belt training with my current sensei, Sensei Robert Stevens. He happened to be having a private training in his house. I got invited and I went there. And from that day, I was hooked and I trained every single week since that day. And it's really something that once it's a part of your lifestyle, it's everywhere. From when you're washing dishes, from when you're opening push doors with them with his shoot those and never shoot those.
Nice.
Um,
So were you the type of person that you were looking specifically for Ninpo? Like how did that come about?
so in all actuality, is a chance happening. Um, it was, I think, my 16th birthday, and a friend from high school happened to give me a Stephen Hayes book, and I flipped through it. Everyone likes ninjas and stuff. My favorite superhero since I was a kid is Batman, trained by ninjas.
Right. Me too.
Yeah. I got a Stephen Hayes book, started flipping through it, and I was training on my own just to be able to do everything. And then I went to the Cherry Blossom Festival in DC.
Yeah.
And during the street performance, I noticed some guys all in black. I walk up to one of them and is like, "Hey, are those Tabi? Are you guys ninjas?" Next thing you know, they go on stage. I get their business card and a few emails. My parents wanted to just make sure the groups, was good and everything.
Of course.
My dad is retired military, and his experience with a lot of ninjutsu people varied from probably country to country and state to state. So he wanted to make sure I was getting in with a good group of guys, and we all rode up to West Virginia for a special training session with Sensei Stevens. And then after that, my local teachers were in Woodbridge and Alexandria. And I would make the weekly travels and train with them 2 times a week while balancing track during high school. So it was pretty much that type of lineage to finding Ninpo. It was all chance by a friend giving me a book, and that sparked my search. And I happened to run into my people at the Cherry Blossom Festival in DC, which I then later performed and then eventually led in following years.
Nice. Very cool. So I know you do a lot of self-training, you do the videos, and I always see you in some kind of gym, whether it's a, BJJ gym or another, I guess it's your dojo or maybe a place that you maybe rent space from. Do you have your own school? If people wanted to train with you, how can they find you?
Okay, so first, I guess put that out there. I don't have like a marketed school area where it has my name on it and we walk in and whatnot. I mostly train outside, and I do have an indoor training location. The area that you saw is pretty much a garage that I fitted out for being able to support training in, and pretty much I've been spread by word of mouth, business cards. People find my channel, and they've reached out to me, and we've put forward, and I've luckily been able to train with a lot of people. If they do want to find me, you guys can email me at whatwoulninjasdo@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
You guys can hit me up on any of those social medias, and I can follow up with that. And you can also hit me up at thewarriorforge@gmail.com.
Nice. So going back to your direct teacher, Sensei Robert Stevens, um, what's it like training under him? I watch a lot of his stuff on YouTube. I think it's great material. He's definitely a wealth of knowledge. But what's he like, as a teacher?
So Sensei Stevens is a really cool guy. Um, Again, when I first met him, I was a 16-year-old teenager, wanting to learn to train in the samurai arts and everything, and I come across this ex-marine that I literally have to look up to because I feel like he's probably like 6'2". I'm 5'4", and he's got a lot of weight on me. But seeing him move when I first came through, and still to this day, he can walk through people with his taijutsu. So one of his favorite systems is Kotoru, and as you know, it's one of the linear systems. Just the first time I've seen him do Koyoku, where he like raised the arm up, punched, and then walked through with Ganseki Taoshi. Um, it was literally like watching him walk through a person, and that person became the air that bounced off of him.
Nice.
Seeing that and how his taijutsu was applied was really impactful for me. So after seeing that, I started applying myself and trying to get my taijutsu like that. But you know how it eventually gets to a point where you realize you have to do your own taijutsu because it's your body. You'll never be able to do it exactly like someone else. But he's very insightful. He has over 30 years of doing Ninpo. Every time I hear him tell a story, I'm just like, oh man, I wasn't even born yet. I was
I'm sure that makes him feel good when you say that.
His training area is filled with pictures with him meeting all the grandmasters, training with a variety of different people, and the amount of people that he's helped with Ninpo over the years. And it's crazy seeing how many people you can touch with the martial arts, and seeing some pictures through each of the decades showing just how many people and stuff.
So you were saying, like, before we actually went live, he trained in all three of the cons, right?
Correct.
So did you get experience with all three cons as well?
So as it stands right now, when I was brought into training underneath of him, we were in the Gimbukan, and we trained that for roughly, I think it was about nine years or so, and then like the last 3 have been under the Bujinkan. And during that time period, I wasn't really limited into where I could go, so I also got experience with some of the Jininkan seminars that happened out in the U.S. So
Nice.
it was about like 2 years ago, I went to Connecticut to train with Manaka. We were going over Kotoru Okuden and getting the experience, to train in the latter half of the scrolls with someone who's been exposed to it for so long was pretty cool.
Nice. So do you have a favorite?
Do I have a favorite? Yes. I will say that my favorite is the Bujinkan as it stands right now, and it's because of the amount of flexibility and what we're able to do. The fact that I really feel like I'm attached to Hombu. I'm constantly getting updates about what's going on, what the theme is, training of the year, and even seeing clips of what's being like put up there recently. So I can see what they're training in, and some of the Shihan are also getting videos uploaded. Bujinkan Takasegi Dojo, they have a website that you can see what's literally being trained at a Hombu frequently, and the videos are searchable. So that kind of resource helps out as well. But most of my like training was in the Gimbukan, but I can't say that I've actually been to many Gimbukan events. I've seen Gimbukan videos and hearing recollections from my teachers, but they haven't had any events in the U.S. that I could attend during my period where I was training with them. But I have been able to travel to do some Bujinkan events. And if it wasn't for COVID, last week I would have been in Ohio training with Nagato Sensei. And
Oh, really?
So that got moved into September, so I'm looking forward to it still.
So does he come to the U.S. often, or was this like a rare thing?
From my experience, there are Shihan that come to America like infrequently. And this is the first that I've had him on my radar to be able to know. So, but I do think he has been over here before.
Gotcha. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I guess so you guys belong to United States Ninpo Academy, which is I guess the group under your teacher Sensei Robert Stevens, right?
Yes.
So tell us more about that and the goals of United States Ninpo Academy.
So United States Ninpo Academy is pretty much becoming a place for people that want to learn Ninpo and ninjutsu as it was meant to be learned. Meaning we don't really exclude what we try to go into. If there's resources about it and it correlates back to the Ryu that existed in Iga, we try to get as much information as we can on it and train it, and then be able to share it with one another and explore the techniques that they have. So we do go into the Takamatsu Den, but then we go into Sarigama, we go into Yari a little bit deeper, and we're not always limited to like one Ryu. We will use one Ryu as our framework and then pull in other information and compare to see what some of the differences are. And we also do more than just taijutsu. We do survival training. We were working like ambush and counter ambush tactics with airsoft rifles. We were doing survival training. I actually led a session because one of the things that I like to do is bushcraft. So I went over how to make shelters, how to make camping implements out of wood that you can utilize, starting fires with different starters and different things like that. So it's like we're really trying to go into Ninpo, not just the taijutsu, not just the kobudo, but going into the Ninpo Sanjuroke and really getting out there and playing with what it has to offer to develop a deeper understanding.
Pretty cool. That's awesome. So you have your YouTube channel, What Would Ninjas Do? And by the way, I love it. Every time you post a new video, I watch it right away. So please, if you like Ninpo, subscribe to his channel. It's awesome. Thank you for giving the info on how to create your own grappling dummy. I thought that was pretty cool because the grappling dummies are pretty expensive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But tell us more about the channel and like, how did that start and like, what are your goals for the channel?
So What Would Ninjas Do is something that I've had on my mind for a very long time. It was very hard to come up with a name for the channel, but I was pretty happy with what I did come up with. It's a little funny because it's not all seriousness. There are a lot of channels that I go into where people are doing martial arts, but sometimes you got to wonder if they're even having fun doing what they're doing. But with my channel, pretty much the goals of What Would Ninja Do is to share Ninpo and experiment with what Ninpo has to offer. I put it into a lab. I try to see if things work under stress. I have my opponents resist. We put on some sparring gear from time to time. And I also like to break down kata and explain how they get used in modern day situations. That is one of my favorite things to do with Ninpo, is to analyze kata and to go as deep as possible as you can into them. I don't understand how someone could get bored with Ninpo, with how much we have to offer. And then I can spend probably a whole week on one kata and just trying out all the different portions and working out how to apply them with different stimuli. The other portion of what ninjas do is I like to create fight scenes. I like my martial arts. I like to have fun with it. And as you know, I like to, work the camera. I actually just bought some new camera gear this week so I can, start getting some stuff ready for once COVID blows over, to get out there with my film crew. And it's also a place for me to share my journey with you guys. I'm not a know-it-all. I'm not going to, anyone that says that they're a know-it-all, they clearly don't know it all. But I'm sharing my journey with people. I like to try out different stuff. One of my friends that I do the channel with, named Kirk, if you guys want to check out his channel, Sir Kirk Knight of Green. He does historical European martial arts. And I like to compare what we're doing a lot from time to time, be it weapons or grappling. They don't have as much striking in their systems like we do, or nagewaza. They have some of it, but it's mostly a little bit of kansetsu and what to do if someone falls on the ground, like Roman wrestling sort of.
Gotcha.
But Kevin does taekwondo, and sometimes I have guest people come on and they do different styles. It's been really cool on that fact.
Give me 1 second, George. I'm having internet issue, so I'm going to turn my mobile hotspot on, so
Okay.
that way we don't lose the connection here. To get in contact with Comcast so they can come over here and fix it, because I've been having issues ever since COVID started. But it's also raining, so that could also be an issue, problem.
Okay.
But yeah, so about the fight scenes, have you done like any like movie work or anything like that, like stunt work or something you might want to get into in the future? Or
I've entered like short film contests in college with a few friends, and for those of you that don't know, I'm also a level 2 parkour instructor. I've been doing parkour since 2006, and
nice.
I've been shooting videos for parkour for a very long time, and then I've just been starting my martial art videos. So I have an old channel where I have a lot more artistic parkour videos called YJ Move, and that sort of got me into the movie making. Is that I liked creating music videos of movement, and then after that, I started like trying to add stories with a few people, and I already loved the martial arts. So then it was just like it's just the next phase of adding martial art fight scenes. And one of the best parts about Ninpo, and I'm certain that you experience it as well, is that when you're in the zone while training, you start seeing how one move connects to another, and it's like you're doing a human jigsaw puzzle, and you sort of just light up once you have a cool combination.
Right.
So, but those combinations sometimes only last for a second in that instance. So I try to like catalog them down and then try to find ways to work some of those into my movies so it actually has like real martial arts, not just like screen martial arts where everyone's just throwing haymakers and twisting in the same spot.
Right.
I like to try to incorporate the traditional styles and have more intricate fight scenes. And with
Uh,
a heavier martial arts background in versus like stunt background, it comes to play. But I've also been learning like stunt break falls and even meeting up with professional stunt teams and having my team like work with them and collab a little bit.
right. I've done a few independent films and stuff like that, and the best part is they're like, they'll ask you, because usually how independent films like come about usually is like, the director knows someone who can play this role, and like I'm not an actor and by any means, but when they find out like I can take falls on the concrete, they're like, you can do that? I'm like, yeah, it's part of martial arts training, so they're amazed, like I can just do a front flip and just land, do an ukemi right on the concrete and not injure myself, you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
it's pretty funny how they're just so shocked by it.
See, my first instance of that when I was working with some of the more professional stunt people is that I had to sell my falls more because my break falls were too on point. So you actually put it on camera where you like catch yourself just enough and then you flop and it just wouldn't sell. So they helped me
um,
up a little bit.
the parkour stuff is pretty cool. I would love to do something like that,
Yeah.
but I feel like I would break a hip or something. Like sometimes I wake up in the morning and I feel like I'm 55 years old.
So that's a very interesting point. Some of my older like students that I had working with me and stuff were way older than me doing parkour, and I even have contacts of seniors doing parkour. There's an increase in senior citizens wanting to learn how to do parkour because, as you probably know, is that the older you get, the injuries mostly come from falling. So learning how to fall correctly or to keep your balance through an older age goes a long way. But just like martial arts, everything is scalable. From every single jump that you do, it doesn't have to be high. You can do it on the ground on lines, vault boxes. You go at your own pace, different things like that. But with what we do in Ninpo, I like to incorporate parkour because it's shinobi gaish, how to escape situations, and having that confidence to be able to do it under pressure.
Right.
Everyone that does self-defense loves to talk about how to fight, but rarely do they ever talk about how to run and how to run and fight. So if someone catches up with you, how to actually apply your martial arts in an escaping scenario. And that's something that I try to do with my students of saying, you're not limited to the confines of the dojo. I want you to think that if you do throw someone down, you don't have to finish them. You could try to get away.
Right.
Practicing techniques like the collar grabs for like Gyokaru, saying, okay, you're trying to run away from someone and someone grabs your collar. So having someone to go in like a jog and then someone grab your collar and defend from that using the same techniques is a little bit different than saying, okay, I'm standing still and someone comes to grab you. And it goes a long way. And I think it's something that needs to be taught with Ninpo.
I agree. And I'm definitely guilty of not training outside enough with my students. I think it's because, we get spoiled sometimes. We have our own facility and, we have heat, we have AC. Sometimes you get in that mindset, like, of getting spoiled instead of going out, in the real world, on the concrete or even in the woods, to do some training. So I'm definitely gonna put that in my repertoire for when we open back up. Like we're gonna do some more outdoor training, some real life training. And you're totally right about getting away to safety. I always tell my students, keep it simple. If somebody grabs you and you can kick somebody in the groin and they let go and they go down, you don't need to stay there in that situation. Don't think like, oh, I gotta finish them off. No, like run to safety, run to your car, get away, or run to the next public place, or whatever. It's okay to run. Don't try to act like a Jackie Chan movie, where you're trying to do all these cool moves, because in real life it doesn't work like that.
I teach my students two very important things about that type of situation. Number one is always expect 10 more. And what I mean by that is you may be fighting one guy, but always expect 10 of his friends to come out to help him if they see you hurting him. Number two is always assume that someone's armed. I'm certain that you guys have played around with like someone has a tanto on them in the middle of grappling and they try to pull it out, or you try to pull their tanto out. And whether you have something on you or they do, the reality is that someone could pull something out and you wouldn't even notice it by the time it's already been used on you. So keeping that in mind and keeping your taijutsu in line with it is very important. Of saying, I put someone down and I tobied away. Just tobying is a good practice, and you fight how you train is a good thing to get that distance between you and a potential attacker.
So what other martial arts do you train in? Because I see sometimes you're training in some other stuff. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. First, I like to preface that with a statement. One thing I like to say is, like, while I do love Ninpo, if someone were to ask me what style I do, it's easier to say that I'm really a mixed martial artist. And when people truly understand Ninpo, they'll realize it's one of the OG mixed martial arts.
That's correct.
The Ninpo Sanjuroke is literally 36 mixed martial arts into one system for you guys to practice and find out what you relate with the most and train with. And as a shinobi, being masters of gathering information, you should want to train in other styles and find out what applies to you and that you can like work with. So I'm a mixed martial artist, but I do see other martial arts with the scope of Ninpo. So when I learn BJJ or judo, I go in there saying, how can I do this with no rules? Someone might have weapons and swords, or do this with a weapon with Soga Bujitsu, and try to make sure that I absorb things in the mindset of Ninpo. And there are often times where I'm like, nah, that gets you destroyed. Inverted in that instance won't do you any good. But if someone's trying to roll you over, inverted has its role, pun intended, in your escape. So it's like, I really feel that that's my approach to martial arts. But with that being said, the martial arts that I have experience with, obviously Ninpo. I've been getting into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, both with generic like BJJ, as well as being exposed to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu system. And then I've been exposed to Judo. However, my Judo coach left. Didn't really say why. The group that I was going to, he just stopped showing up one day. I tried to hit him up, and he pretty much just ghosted the studio.
Oh, wow.
Then I have some friends that do Taekwondo, so I learned how to do tricking. Like, I'm pretty much open to learning a lot of stuff. I have another friend that I do Muay Thai with on the side. So it's like, while I'm doing all those arts, I sort of just pick up some of the basics and then apply Ninpo to them. And I'll do some sparring. And my friends are, I've been blessed to have some good people to spar with that are open-minded to Ninpo. Instead of saying, oh yeah, that wouldn't work, or I hit them in a certain way and they act like I wouldn't do anything. Like, if you get someone in a headlock and you think, oh yeah, I'm gonna koken him in the temple, it has some effects. But if someone doesn't want to listen to that, they'll just pop up and there's no reason for you to continue trying to set up for a throw that was there because they didn't want to recognize the koken. So,
Right.
but a good amount of people. Oh, and the HEMA guy. So when I train with Kirk, we go over like European longsword.
Oh, that's cool.
Grappling, and he does pole arms and a few other stuff too. Yeah.
Very cool. So, like, what's your take on like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and tournaments and things like that? Because I remember one time I rolled, as they call it, with a BJJ person, and they had me in some kind of like guillotine lock or whatever, and I pinched the back of their leg. So you know that old trick, I just grabbed just that skin in the back, and yeah, and they let go right away, and then I got them in the lock and tapped them out, right? And then right afterwards, it was like a bickering contest, like saying I couldn't do that. I was like, well, we didn't go over any rules because I don't compete in anything, I don't compete in jiu-jitsu or anything like that. So we didn't establish any rules before we started. So, the way I train is different than the way you train, right? Yeah. So like, what's your take on like BJJ and competition? Like, do you think it's good?
Okay. I've thought about this one pretty well, and my response to this is that everyone goes into martial arts for their own personal mission. So I had one roommate in college. He was doing Taekwondo, and he absolutely loves Taekwondo. And I'd do some stuff with him, and the techniques he was using was good for sparring, but not necessarily good for self-defense. And it was point sparring too. So it's like
Right.
hit and run tactics, no power commitment. Didn't really have plans for what to do against throws and how to fall properly. But I spent the whole semester trying to convince him to come train with me, and he just wouldn't bite. And it finally, just hit him one day, and he was like, I like doing it for the sports stuff. And it took him forever to say that. I was always talking self-defense and stuff, but that was the first time he said, I just like doing it for the sport portion of it. And that's when I had to sit down and realize is that everyone does martial arts for their own specific reasons. While I like to go for self-defense, people love the thrill of competition. I'm pretty sure you feel it when you play basketball with friends and stuff. You don't think about going pro with it per se, but you love the sense of competition and playing against one another. And jiu-jitsu has that same exact element. I've met some practitioners that are old school and want to stick with self-defense. The Gracie Jiu-Jitsu system is built with self-defense in mind. And then it's like the first section of it is all about dealing with people that don't know anything about jiu-jitsu. Then the intermediate is dealing with people that have some experience with jiu-jitsu. And then the expert level is dealing with someone who is also well-versed in jiu-jitsu. And the way they developed that, I thought was pretty cool. But then there's the Brazilian jiu-jitsu groups out there that are sort of tunnel vision about competition. They may cheat you in that, but they'll always say, oh yeah, you should come compete. You should come compete. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that for some people, that's not their goal. And I like rolling with people that do compete, but I haven't had that competition of actually going to compete myself. I was supposed to one day, but I got a cut square across my forehead the night before the competition. So it was an open wound. Anything to touch it would have just made it burst out again.
Right. Right. That would have been no good.
especially getting someone's chest smothered in you with sweat.
Right, right.
But more or less is like I go into jiu-jitsu with Ninpo in mind, and I'm always picking something up that I can bring back. Like for instance, I absolutely love working with the Darsh and Anaconda guillotine family. It happens so often in our art, saying like, "Oh, you're going for a makikomi, but someone's fighting it. How to pop them back down and switch over." And if they again fight it in one way or another, you can flow it. Anytime you slam someone on the ground and how you fall in, you can flow your arms into the specific positions that set you up for one of those three. And it's just been something that I've been noticing myself. However, if you're just say like, is competition good? It's good if it's good for that individual person. To a certain degree, you'll talk to older martial artists. A lot of them will say that's something that I did for my ego, and then I reached a certain point and I didn't need to do it anymore. And for anyone to say that they don't have an ego is also sort of a lie. You need an ego to exist as a human.
Right.
Um, some people will mature faster than others and figure that kind of thing out. But competition is a thing that can be used for your personal growth or for developing your ego and how you are as a person. But I think as long as people are going in with it with the right approach and enjoying it, there's nothing wrong with it.
Good answer. That's pretty cool. And I agree. You know, a lot of people when they walk in through the door, you know, who understand the different types of martial arts disciplines, they'll be like, what's the difference between you and the Taekwondo school down the street or the BJJ school? I'm like, it's all about what you want. You know, if you want to learn self-defense, Ninpo is perfect. You know, because there's so many different things about it in the self-defense world. And going back to what you said previously, you know, I always have a lot of students that ask me like, you know, Sensei, when will you know everything? I'm like, never. They're just too much, you know, in just Ninpo. You know what I mean? That's not including all the other arts that I train in as well. You know, just Ninpo, you'll never learn everything in one lifetime. It's impossible. So it's like, that's why I continue to do it. You know what I mean? Because I'll never get bored. But yeah, so I always tell people, you know, it depends what you like. You know, if you want to compete, you know, want to win tournaments, you want to compete on a national level and things like that, you know, do Taekwondo. You know, if you want to grapple, do BJJ. You know, if you want a little bit of everything, you know, but not compete, you know, come do Ninpo. You know what I mean? So it all depends on what you want.
The main conflict is with people that are too deep in one art or the other, saying that yours wouldn't work where mine does, or trying to compare them when, you know, you're comparing apples to oranges.
Right.
I will say BJJ offers a lot of things for self-defense, but if you're not training the mindset for self-defense behind that, then you're just training martial art moves. If they're not going over expecting multiple people, expecting glass and other things on the ground, which way is the exit? Did you plan your escape route before you went into a building? Do you know where like the nearest hospital is in case someone were to get hurt? All these different tactical elements to self-defense, as well as the psychology behind it and how to interact with people and de-escalate situations before you ever get there. Then it's just you're learning how to beat up another person for sport. But if you're learning those elements, as well as, you know, some of the things in Ninpo are very like basic, but if you don't think about it, it goes beyond you. Did you look in the reflection before you went to the ATM machine to see if someone was actually around you or something? And all those different elements.
And I would agree. And that's what we were talking about in some of my previous podcasts, is that because we're in Ninpo, I think, or, you know, Ninpo or Budo Taijutsu, I think some schools lack that real world training, and they're only practicing traditional kata. Well, that's why I love about your channel so much is you're actually doing it in a real life situation, and you're showing people this is how you would apply, you know, koyoku in a real life situation, right? Or out on the street or whatever, you know what I mean? So like, what's your favorite part about Ninpo? Like, why Ninpo? And like, what's your favorite buge?
Why Ninpo? As you were saying, it's sort of just like multiple points that it takes on. It's like it does weapons, it does unarmed, it does spiritual training, it does psychology, It does medicine. It does survival training. Like, it's so broad. One of the ways that me and one of my friends talk about it is that a lot of people like to call Ninpo a martial art, but when you really think about it, it's a military system. And when you say that you have a military, you have your ground, your air, your medics, you have just like almost every facet covered that when you go out into war, you're prepared for it. And thinking about that is just like, it's a system that has a little bit of everything. We have guns, we have bow and arrow, we have my pole arm. If you get past my pole arm, you have to get past the booby trap that I laid there before we said we were going to go to battle.
Right.
And when you thought you were going to get me, it turns out I actually told you a false location through a second spy. And just like these different elements of it that are found in the Bansen Shukai, the Shonenki, help you like really go deep into it and experience these different parts of Ninpo. And I think that's like the magic behind the art, is that there's just so many faces to it that you can explore and go into. And it sort of just leaves me wanting more every time I do it. Like, I'm doing bow this month, and I'm just like, I really want to go over Tonto. I want to get better at my bow right now. And just trying to have that little self-constraint to get good at something before you want to dance around and do a lot.
So what's your favorite?
Now, when you're saying my favorite buge, is you're referring to the ruhas or the weapons?
We'll do one of each.
Okay. So my favorite weapon is probably going to be Kusari Fundo.
Okay.
And for those of you that don't know, Kusari Fundo is 2 weights with a lot of chain behind it. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and grab mine out the closet to show you guys.
Yeah, go ahead. So guys, if you want to ask George any questions, please drop them in the comments as soon as possible, because we're almost done. But I definitely want to get some questions in for George if you guys have any.
So this is my specific Kusari Fundo. Again, I like them being the longer. Manriku Gusari is overrated with it being a shorter weight weapon. And it's generally your arm's length. So the reason that I like Kusari Fundo and chain weapons a little in general is because anything that you guys learn with a stick weapon, you can generally apply with chain weapon. And while it may be unconventional to walk around with chain around you, you can have paracord, you can have, locks on you. There's many ways that you can make something similar. But if you have rope and you can make a good knot at the end of it, or like if you learn how to make a monkey's fist, you can put like a marble on the inside. But a lot of ways you can make self-defense implements that won't be considered illegal, like Kusari Fundo. But depending on your state and country, obviously. But being able to like wrap around things, and I've even done Kusari Fundo techniques with nunchaku, and it's just like really cool about that restraint level. And for those of you that may not know, it was considered a weapon that like causes blunt force trauma and not to spill blood on holy grounds. So they would use it to tie up people and, take them off the holy ground. What happened after that, it was up to them. But it's used against sword, it's used against unarmed. And I got in a little bit deeper with it when Akban had put up a video a while back of saying how to use Kusari Fundo against boxers. And people were going ham in the comments saying that never work against a boxer, this, that, and the third. And the thing I had to reflect about was like, how many boxers ever trained to fight against the chain?
Right.
Probably not that many.
Right.
Like treating it like as a weapon ready, like for boxing itself. Someone would come in and you try to meet their jab with the weight, so they crush the knuckles. Trying to use the chain to whip them in the face. Different aspects. I felt it was so versatile that I just had to get good at it. And one of the other things is like, you guys like Mortal Kombat, throwing the chain out there like Scorpion is a pretty powerful feeling. But it's a very versatile weapon, and I enjoy it a lot.
That's awesome. One of my students, he carries a rope training Kusari Fundo on his backpack whenever he flies through the airport, and they never say anything to him because it's just a rope. Yeah. So he has it with him at all times, especially when traveling, just in case something goes down.
Yeah, and if he could get like a plastic weight or a lead weight or something like that. It stays in like the center of it, like that'd be cool. Because again, like so hand-to-hand combat is what you're most likely to encounter, but then after that is knife and then gun. And someone pull out on a knife, and then you pull out your Kusari Fundo and you're whirling it around, and you can hear it cutting through the wind. Is one of the scariest things you've probably experienced, especially knowing that if that thing were to like hit you, it'd break bones upon impact. It can crush a watermelon. It can definitely crush someone's skull or
Right.
with that same motion. But having that sound is enough to deter an opponent with that, and you have that extended range. Kusari Fundo is about one like Ichimonji Fudoken in, so you can keep someone at bay with just that technique of spinning it. And then I'm not gonna say Kusari is better than a gun. I like to have a longer reach weapon, obviously, but
Right.
it's definitely better than a knife in that aspect, and people don't mentally expect that. So I'm pretty certain people have brought up the OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, then act, and everyone's ready for hand on hand. If someone pulls out a knife, they're ready for a knife. But if someone pulls out a chain and you've never trained against something like that before, your brain is already in flight or fight mode, and if it doesn't know how to like deal with a threat, it probably wants to revert to flee. And I think that that's a better like mental weapon than a physical one against opponents. Doing something that they have no idea about. And for those of you that see me do cartwheels and stuff like that, or flips at the end of katas, it's part of Tugakureru. And one of the reasons that's practiced in the scrolls, it says, do a Toby, cartwheel away, and then roll 3 times and then hide. Generally, if I just beat up your friend and then I ran away and I did like a backflip off of a wall, you're really going to chase me?
That's right.
Like
so is that your favorite Ruha, or?
My favorite Ruha is actually Shinin Fudoru.
And why is that?
It's actually like a few different reasons. Number one, I'm actually Native American. People can't normally tell from how I look, but being a system that was forged in nature, about nature, really sat home with me. And I like how it has level changes. It may start high, but then it goes really low really quickly, sort of like Chikage Yoshinru. But each one of the elements is practiced in nature. They were big about not having a dojo back then. They said, wherever you train is your dojo.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons I enjoy training outside so much. I train inside too. I'm human. But I've been through some harsh training outside, and that's been one of the things that helped develop my kokoro. I've trained in rain, I've trained in mud, I've trained in snow. I learned how to punch and kick on ice, all these different things. And ninja often practiced Shugendo, which was the practice of going out into nature to develop yourself, find spiritual enlightenment, and in times gain like supernatural skills. And putting yourself through a lot of these things shows you truly what you're capable of. Do something challenging to see if you can do it. I had students that didn't have rain suits in college. I was like, okay, it's going to rain this day. We're going to be training outside. Plan properly. I'm like, we got to do everything, because if you use this as a excuse, I'm not trying to do it every single time. This is a time that you can use to overcome something. I had students coming up with their feet in grocery bags inside their shoes. And I'm like, right on. Like, you're showing nin, you're persevering through the elements, and
Right.
really learning to access and train yourself to become a warrior. Not just like, oh man, that's too hard, I'm not going to do it. It's hard, and you're going to do it. So that's one of the reasons Shinin Fudoru sits with me so well. It's also got a variety of weapons in it as well. Now, it's been hard getting that information about the weapons, because they got the Odachi, they have the Bison Toe, they have the Battle Axe, the Ono, and a whole bunch of other cool weapons that I've only got a few clips of footage of Hatsumi and some of the Shihan ever using. And since it's the only Ruha that said it's had them, I've pretty much like been trying to compile that and train them on my own as well. But it's very diverse, and it's really thick, because there's the Jutaijutsu, then there's the Daken Taijutsu, and then there's the weapons. But it's also like the weapons sort of went in and out of Kuki Shininru, to my knowledge, as well.
Do you believe they, the higher ups are with withhold information, like, you know, especially about certain Ru. Uh, do you think they're not teaching everything, or maybe only to certain people?
Um, it'd be silly if I said no, but because everyone's always like, I taught you everything you know, but not everything I know.
Right.
But there's always that like little element that there's going to be kuden. There's going to be stuff that you felt like you put in a lot of hard time for, that you learned from someone that took you like months to get to know. And then someone that just met you was like, hey, I'd like to see how to do this. Oh, you don't know how to do it? Oh, well, I'm not going to stay here long then. It's sort of vetting yourself. But I go back and forth with how I feel about this. It's not an easy answer. I told you that I practice with one friend that does HEMA.
Hmm.
In historical European martial arts, they put it all out there. You can go find the manuals. Some of them are so old that they've been archived, and you can download them off the internet. And they have pictures and word by word translations right beside each thing. So you can see the source language. You can see what it's translated to in English. You see the picture of how to do it and what it's referring to. And it's literally all out there. So you can learn a European Ruha uh, like straight out the book. But with Ninpo, sometimes it's not really the one way of doing it. It's
Right.
something that we all wish was like, what's the right way of doing this? But one grandmaster shows you how to do it one time, then like 2 years later, it's shown differently. And that's part of Ninpo because we're supposed to be able to adapt. As the grandmaster learns new things, he's going to want to change and alter techniques. You don't do Omotegyak the way you first learned how to do it.
Right.
Same way I don't do Onikodaki like how I initially learned it. It's evolved with me through my experience and everything else, and that's something that HEMA may not have with strictly sticking by the book. But it is nice to wish we had something like that.
Right.
The descriptions in some of the books are a little bit different, but so I do think grandmasters and Shihan are going to hold material that they find a little bit more important and that they've gone through a lot to learn secret. Um, but I also don't feel like anyone's trying to deliberately make you train wrong.
No, I would agree with you in that statement. If you look at videos from like the 80s or even the 70s, they definitely were training differently back in the day. And you see a lot of stuff back then that's not really taught anymore. And maybe it's because I think sometimes maybe people don't know what to ask for. You know what I mean? Like regular students like us maybe don't know what to ask for, um, and I think it's just so much that sometimes maybe they teach what they think people want to learn.
Yeah.
Um, where guys like you and I, like, we want to know freaking everything. We want to know every secret. You know what I mean? So, but yeah, I agree with that statement. So you mentioned the Banten Shukai and the Shoninki earlier, which for those of you that don't know, those are two of the main ninjutsu manuals. Well, there's actually three, the Ninpiden as well. So I just wanted to ask you, what do you think of Anthony Cummins and his work?
So there's a lot of back and forth about Anthony Cummins, and I think it's some people that have had issues with him early on, maybe sometimes a little bit of jealousy, and then he may have actually done stuff wrong. I have no clue. But as a third party that hasn't experienced any of that, I view his work as a valid resource.
Yeah.
He pushes all of his information as much as possible. Will I actually go through and check all that stuff out? Probably not, because I can't read Japanese that well. Or sometimes it's referring to older Japanese, which isn't even practiced anymore today. And I don't have access to all the documents that he spent the time and effort to go through. But I view his works, like, I've read through them, and there's nothing that sticks out to me like, oh, this is horrible. I will discredit this whole entire book and throw it over my shoulder. I appreciate his work, and I utilize it to train for him. Like, there's nothing about that. I use the Nippidin as well. And for any of those that are, like, super scholarly, if you want, there are multiple sources for each of these. you can go through and compare chapters and whatnot. But I will also say sometimes I've seen other translations that just weren't as crisp. So how your brain picks up information and who you choose as an author will end up being a personal preference. But Anthony Cummins is pretty good in how he produces his work and sources the material. And for those of you that want to understand Ninpo, you have to do some reading. It's not just
Right.
physical art. You have to do some self-reflection, reading into things that you may not ever apply to yourself, but it's good to be exposed to it. There's a lot of stuff, like there's probably like a chapter this thick about just how to make pyrotechnics in the Bonsen Shukai.
Yep.
You can't go out and buy all this stuff, and it's meant for Japan.
Right.
So you won't be able to find all the things that are listed in there to do it yourself. But also, you don't want to go out and buy it so you don't get blacklisted by the government. But it's good to get exposed to it and understand there are different practices out there. And there's even one chapter in there. I'm pretty sure it's in the Bonsen Shukai, but it may be in the Shoninki. But it's about reading a person's face. And by reading the features of their face, determining if they're good or bad. Now, if that ain't the worst lesson of profiling I've ever heard, but it's in the Bonsen Shukai and it's a historical study. So you get to look at what people were thinking back then and trying to apply it. And yes, there are archetypes. People use archetypes in understanding things and stories. And so if when you reflect it to different elements, you're like, there's a lot of psychology that was hidden in this that they just didn't comprehend at that point in time, that was further developed and shown today that has some relevance but may not hold 100% scientific proof behind it. So yeah, that's sort of my take on those texts. Pick them up, read them. If you don't like them, you don't like them. If you learn something, cool.
I agree. So I tell my students that if they truly want to understand the art that they're taking, they definitely need to learn the history behind it, and which includes, the manuals like Bonsen Shukai, Shoninki, Nippiden, things like that. And I enjoy Anthony and what he's done for that type of thing, for those manuals, that the guerrilla warfare type of manuals. I don't think he's a martial artist in any way. He's more of a ninjutsu researcher.
Yeah.
But I know sometimes he tries to come off as a martial artist. But if you want to learn martial arts, you need to go to a real Ninpo school. But if you want to learn the history behind it, his stuff is great. That's the way I see it.
To my knowledge, he's restarted Notori-Ryu.
Right.
The Nippiden, the Shoninki was made after, or the author was from Notori-Ryu. But I really enjoy them as a book club. So
right.
They actually go in and they discuss the information that they're reading, not just oh, the book says this and that's the end. It's no, I've seen pictures of people actually recreating some of the things in the manual, how to hold an ember during travel so that you could relight your fire later, making the one-sided lantern so you don't get blinded. Of course, we got the flashlights now, surefire. But it's really cool being able to go back and make sure you have these skills. Survival prep, people generally get in it for two reasons. They think the end of the world is coming, or they have a lot of genuine fun doing it. And I'm one of those people that have genuine fun learning how to do things the old way just because it's fun. And it's a good skill to have in case you ever were without tools. And these books cover a lot of information about that kind of stuff, but there's also way better text for you depending on where you live, through military manuals and through latitude-based survival books. So depending on where you are on the world, what you're likely to encounter, types of trees, fuels, foods, different stuff like that. And I truly enjoy that aspect of Ninpo as well, and it's good. But one thing that I would like to suggest is that those people checking out those types of books, Anthony Cummins has this one book called Dispelling the Myth of the Samurai and Ninja. That's a really good book too, because I think all too often people romanticize the samurai and the ninja without knowing the darker side of things. The Bushido type of way of thought and stuff sort of happened after the Warring States period, and there was a lot of stuff that like Ronin and Samurai did that most people would not even, think that they were capable of doing or would do because of their social class.
Yeah, yeah. I actually have that book. I haven't started reading it yet, but I'm the type of person, like if a book comes out, I'm like, all right, purchase, right? And then I'll put it away because I don't want to, I don't ever want to like read a little bit, then put it away, and then get to another book and read a little bit, put it away. I finish reading every book, then I go into my library, pick out a book I haven't read yet, because I'm always afraid like if it's a good book, it's going to go out of stock and then I can't get it. So I always purchase books right away when they're available. That way I have it later to read.
I feel you. And I had to do some reading myself about how to read and pick up information faster because I sort of operated on the same sense. And what I would do often is sort of like get a few books, and when I get it, I try to like scan through, read all the head titles and stuff, so that way I have a catalog of what's inside that book, so that if like I come across something later, I'm like, wait a minute, I need to know a little bit more about that or find some information. I can key up like what book had that information I could go into deeper on it. So it's a little bit like that, like cross-referencing resources and stuff.
Nice. Cool. Well, I know we said this in the beginning, but just in case for people that just tuned in now, or towards the end, where are you located? How can people find you if they want to train with you? Plug your channels. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi again, everyone. My name's George. I have a YouTube channel called What Would Ninjas Do. I'm based out of Prince George's County, Maryland. And if you guys want to train with me, all you have to do is send me an email either through whatwoulddninjasdo@gmail.com, or check out any of these social medias, being YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook. You can personal message me there, and we could always follow up after that. I do teach classes regularly. COVID has everyone on lockdown though right now. I normally train Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 to 9 p.m. And we go over a plethora of material. I have my own curriculum that I'm working with, that's based with Sensei Stevens with United States Ninpo Academy. And I've just made a few modifications in how I go over material and stuff. But if you guys are looking for training in taijutsu, kobudo, learning survival training, parkour, and a little bit of free running, I like movement. If you guys want to learn how to move, and if you guys even want to just be in some of my YouTube videos for stunts and stuff, hit me up. Let me know. And thank you guys for tuning in and checking out what Lewis and I were talking about.
Yeah, I want to take you up on that offer. I want to be in some videos.
I'm all for it.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much, George, for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you. I respect you a lot. I love what you're doing. We need more. I think we need more Ninpo enthusiasts like you, putting the information out there and how it's applied in the real world. Because it's not about, we're training to throw smoke bombs on the ground and try to climb roofs and things like that. Like, yeah, that stuff is cool and it's old, ninjutsu, but I think there needs to be more people like you explaining how this can work in a real life scenario.
Yeah. Modern day smoke bomb, salt from the salt shaker, man.
Yep. All right, man. Thank you very much. Sayonara.
Sayonara.